So for many years, I've been talking about the converging crisis. And not just me, many people have been talking about the converging crises that we're facing, that this society, that civilization, the culture of empire has created and facilitated and exacerbated and continues to expand the depth and number and ferocity of these crises. And that's hitting home for some people right now where I live. I'm here in Oregon, and what's happening right now is wildfires on a scale that have not been seen in living memory in this region. Several towns in my area have been completely destroyed. You may notice the color of the light is kind of strange on this video. That's because there is thick smoke in the air. I can see about a quarter mile down the road, increasing with decreasing clarity as you go, and then it's just completely blocked by the smoke. So the air quality here is hazardous. It's by far the worst in the country, and like I said, several towns have been completely destroyed. There are some fatalities and so on. This is, in one sense, it's natural. Wildfire is completely natural and is a relatively common occurrence in the ecology of the western US. Wildfire is normal. And the fire suppression that has taken place over the past 100+ years in the West has created an artificial condition of higher fire danger because, fuels have built up. And on the other hand, people are not used to fires. People are not adapted to fires in their behavior. So people build their houses in areas that are extremely prone to fires. And even sedentism in the first place. The indigenous peoples of this region were seasonally nomadic, and they would head up into the mountains at this time of year and get out of the most fire-prone areas. These were deliberate choices made to conform to the ecology of the region, to adapt themselves to the land rather than trying to force the land to adapt to you, which will not happen. Industrial civilization is powerful. This culture is incredibly powerful, but the natural processes that are playing out across this planet are infinitely more powerful. As the saying goes, you cannot argue with physics, right? And so we are seeing the result of not only the fire suppression, but also the global warming impacts. We're seeing extreme weather that has not been seen in recorded history. We're seeing temperatures that are breaking records all across the West. We're seeing these extremely unusual wind patterns where we have strong winds coming from the east and turning these small fires that normally would burn at this time of year and be relatively small into giant conflagrations, giant blazes that are spreading rapidly to the west, out of the mountains and into the more populated zones in the foothills and in the lowlands, in the river valleys like the Willamette River Valley where I live. And this is not a surprise. Anyone who's been paying attention should know that this is going to happen. It's going to happen increasingly commonly as time moves on. As global warming intensifies, extreme weather is going to get worse. So nobody should be surprised by this happening. This has been happening in different forms all over the world for many, many years, whether in the forms of massive flooding, an increase in hurricane frequency and strength, an increase in the type of storms that spawn tornadoes. All types of extreme weather are on the rise, and it's because when you add heat to the climate system, a closed system on this planet, that heat translates to more energy in the storms, more energy to evaporate water. More water vapor in the atmosphere leads to heavier downpours. More energy leads to stronger winds. These are, again, very predictable outcomes, and we have been seeing them happen for a long time now. I'm not at all saying that this isn't a tragedy, that people aren't, people are losing their lives, people are losing their homes. This is a serious issue. What I'm pointing out is that this is something that we should expect, and we should expect it increasingly going forward unless there are dramatic changes made to the driving by somebody I know, and there goes a fire truck too. Wonder what's going on. Unless there are dramatic changes made to the way that this culture operates, right? We can expect more and more of this. And let's get back to the converging crisis element, because all of this is happening on top of the coronavirus pandemic, the COVID-19 disease, right? We are seeing this sweep across the planet, and it is hitting those who are in poor health the worst. It is having serious health impacts on some people who are even relatively healthy. It seems like most healthy people are doing relatively okay with the coronavirus. But then there are all kinds of reports of people having strange, lingering symptoms that go on for months and months after they resolve the initial acute symptoms of coronavirus. So we're not really sure what this looks like. This is a completely new thing. And so, you know, that coronavirus crisis is exacerbating things. That's being layered on top of this crisis with the wildfires that were happening right now, and they are complicating each other because the smoke that's happening right now that's so thick through the air here is very dangerous for people's lungs. The air quality is hazardous right now, and that is going to be especially difficult for people who already have breathing difficulties, who have asthma, who have lung disease, who have heart disease, who have these pre-existing medical conditions that predispose them towards respiratory issues and circulatory issues. That's going to exacerbate the impact of the coronavirus. And with thousands of people fleeing these wildfires, having to cram into, you know, these shelters that are getting set up in different places, like the community centers over here, and different churches and government buildings and schools that have been closed to the public and opened up to these refugees. They're trying to adhere to social distancing guidelines, but there is likely to be a spike, perhaps a small one, but some sort of spike in coronavirus cases due to this, and there will likely be an increase in the severity of cases due to the smoke compromising people's immune systems and their immune response, as well as, you know, decreasing the overall function of their respiration, their ability to breathe well. You know, I'm feeling it myself. I got a cough, I'm hacking up stuff. It's not nice to be out in this, and that's with me staying inside literally for the last 72 hours straight and wearing a mask in the few short occasions when I have had to step outside. So then we've got the protests going on. We've got the violence in the streets. We've got the white supremacists and the Trump supporters holding major rallies, while the Black Lives Matter supporters are holding their own protests and rallies. And we've got brawls, we've got shootings, we've got people getting attacked with cars, we've got this deep political instability that comes out of the long legacy of racism in this country that is not resolved, that obviously there's still deep issues with, right? And that is another layer to this instability that we're seeing, and Portland, Oregon has been one of the main sites of this instability. You know, we've seen people killed, we've seen, you know, over 100 days of, you know, pretty much nightly protests and riots that are turning extremely dangerous. So that's not a good sign. Now I got a fire truck going by me, headed in the direction that I'm going, right? So, so this is hopefully not a fire right in my area down here, because this is my house down here. This is where I live. I don't own this place, I'm a renter, but you know, that's scary, and we're packed up. We've been packed up for 72 hours just in case, because you don't know what's gonna happen. The fire danger is so high, and we live in an area that's just a tinderbox, so we're ready to go if we need to on a moment's notice. So, you know, when I shut down this video, I gotta turn on the radio and see what's going on. Try and catch the news, try and pick up the scanner and see what's happening. You know, the smoke is just thicker than ever around here. But the point I want to make about this converging crisis is that now is a moment for political engagement. Now is a moment for people to get off their butts and get organized and get together. Like, this is the time. A crisis time is not the time to lose your head. It's not the time to panic. It's not the time to, you know, come up with some cock-brained scheme to try and get through this. Now's the time to get organized and stick together, right? Because if we get through these crises, it's going to be through collective effort. It's going to be through community. It's going to be through collaborative work to change the fundamental structures of these problems, right? Civilization is one of the underlying causes, is ultimately the root cause of the coronavirus crisis, because it comes from deforestation, it comes from wild animals being pushed to the brink as this culture expands, which is the imperative and the pattern of civilization. And people living in dense numbers in cities throughout the world is a consequence of industrial civilization, of civilization itself. And that's the conditions that this disease thrives in. The wildfires, they have their root in civilization. Racism is a product of civilization. It emerges from civilized cultures engaging in the practices of expansion and territorial control and colonialism that are endemic to civilization, that are defining characteristics of civilization. So when I talk about civilization for all these years, I'm not talking about an abstract thing. I'm not talking about deep anthropology. I'm not talking about history. I'm talking about what's going on right now. The consequences that we are living through right at this moment are a product of the social form of organization that this culture has adopted. And it's imperative upon all of us that we begin to take action, that we begin to organize in our communities to abandon these structures, to abandon these ways of life that are no longer serving human beings and have long been not serving the planet. They haven't been serving a lot of human beings for a long time either. If you're on the short end of the stick when it comes to colonialism, when it comes to slavery, when it comes to sweatshop labor, when it comes to poverty, and what have you. So, and you know, not to mention patriarchy. So, it is imperative upon all of us that we work on these issues. Now is the time, right? These crises are upon us. They are not future states of being. And for people who aren't living in areas affected by the wildfire right now, or who aren't living in these areas where, you know, the social unrest that's sweeping the United States is really playing a big role in your community, it will come to you, right? It will come to you. 5 years ago, people in the Western US were just looking overseas at what was happening in Bangladesh, or in Kiribati, or in Pakistan, or in Iraq, or in Syria, and just, you know, shaking their heads and saying, damn, that looks rough, you know? And now that type of stuff is coming home. And it's gonna be hitting home for all of us in the years to come. So now is the time to get organized. You know, I mean, 30 years ago, 100 years ago, longer was the real time to get organized. But that's past, right? That's water under the bridge. We gotta work with what we got now, and what we got now is each other. But what we also have now is the knowledge that we can reflect on everything that has gone wrong over the past decade, over the past 100 years, over the past 10,000 years. This culture has made a lot of mistakes, and for people who are paying attention, those mistakes are actually pretty obvious. The problems that we face are technical problems, they are social problems, right? It's not actually a mystery how to solve these issues, how to stop global warming, how to stop the destruction of forests, how to, you know, put the lid back on this type of epidemic disease outbreak that we're seeing. How to, you know, how to start to roll back the effects and impacts of racism and systemic inequality throughout our society. These things aren't actually big mysteries. They're political issues. They're power issues. So that's why we got to get organized, okay? So I hope people who are watching this, I hope that, you know, if you're at home right now, that if you're watching this and you kind of been following stuff on the sidelines, you know, there are so many ways that you can support and get involved in social movements. And frankly, a lot of what's going on out there, I think, is a waste of time and energy. I think it's playing into the very systems that we're supposed to be dismantling. I think that, you know, a lot of the activism and organizing that's out there is not getting to the root of the problem. It's fundamentally liberal and oriented towards, you know, small, minor reforms of the system. You know, that said, even that stuff can be very useful. You know, I'm supportive of reforms and stuff that changes the status quo, even if it's in small ways. People like to set up these false dichotomies, but I don't buy into that shit, right? We need fundamental transformative change, however. And when you're in the moment of a crisis, that's the time to have a vision. That's the time to think big. That's the time to think about the fundamental transformations that need to take place in our society in order to address these issues, okay? So I hope that people, will start to gain that courage and gain that self-respect and gain that sense of integrity to engage in these struggles and call for this fundamental transformation. Because there's no time left. We're in the midst of it. We are in the midst of it, and things are only going to get more and more serious from here, right? We know this. We know this is coming. And like I said, people like me have been talking about this for years and years and years. So if you've been listening, if you've been paying attention, then you know how serious this is. And I just want to give a shout out and so much respect to all the comrades and the friends and the allies and the people who are listening to this, who have been engaging with these issues, who have been contributing in various ways, whether that's being an organizer, being an activist, direct action, doing stuff behind the scenes, having conversations with people, spreading the word about these issues, building community, fundraising, going to events and doing the cooking. All these things are extremely helpful. And we need all of this as part of a big culture of resistance, as part of the major transformations that we were talking about. Now, for those people who haven't been engaged in this way, now's the time, right? Now is the time. It's too late to stand on the sidelines. And, I don't wish that sense of powerlessness on anyone, because the reality is we are not powerless. We are enculturated to be powerless. We are taught to feel powerless. And the reality is that is done because we are not powerless. We have power if we reach out and take it, if we organize, right? We don't have power alone. We don't have power through our buying habits and through consumer choices and through, individualistic capitalist bullshit. We have power when we organize, when we have community, when we get together, right? I'm just riding by these deer right here, out here in the smoke. We've got 2 baby fawns. The wildlife, those are the wildlife, the poor, the indigenous people, the women, the natural world. This is who's getting fucked over by what's happening in the world today. And it's up to us to organize. It's up to everyone to organize and work together and collaborate so that we can turn things around.